He hit play on the projector and a clipped video of me bending over our mother's bed filled the mirrored wall. My voice reduced to a pleading whisper that he had trimmed to sound like a beggar counting favors. The room went quiet except for the tinny audio of me coaching her through a breathing exercise while his captions accused me of turning illness into attention. And people waited for me to break. To sob. To apologize for the sin he had rearranged from the truth. Instead, my back stayed straight. My hands stayed still. And I said, almost gently, that home therapy is never pretty. Then I added that I keep full sessions. Because memory is a long road, and proof belongs to the patient. And somewhere in those sessions is the afternoon. He rehearsed a cruel joke about her forgetting his name, and asked me if I thought it would kill at the party. If you're still here, stay with me. He thought a mirror could make me small. He forgot mirrors also show the person holding the knife. I will not give you scenery. I will give you receipts, the kind that live in the mouth and under the ribs. He wanted a performance. I will give him one truth at a time until there is nothing left of the costume he wears when he calls himself the dutiful son. The act, he cropped my voice into something thin and needy, and threw it across the glass until my reflection looked like a thief. The sacrifice I gave up weekends, freelance contracts, and sleep, to learn how to guide our mother through breathing when her chest tightened, to speak slowly when names slid away from her tongue, to accept that she would forget the shape of my face and remember the shape of a hallway she walked in childhood. The job that would have paid for a newer car and a better apartment went to someone else because I chose the slow, unpaid work of keeping her mind open a little longer. The deception you like being the martyr, he said, a month ago, smiling with all his teeth. You don't know how to live without applause. The vile contrast while I was keeping a diary of her daily phrasing because she loved to sing in cadence is a map back to a melody. He was using that same diary to time his edit, cutting my questions so the answers sounded forced, making the pauses look greedy, turning the softest labor of my life into a ticket booth for pity he accused me of selling. The resolve applause is loud and dies quickly. I prefer silence that lasts, the kind that follows a verdict. He invited our mother's church friends, her old voice teacher, the neighbor who bakes pound cake, the coworker who once told him he'd be great if he learned how to listen. He wanted witnesses. He deserved them. I had said yes to helping with the renovation because he called it a tribute, the mirror room. Ray, she sang to mirrors as a girl. It will feel like stepping back into her throat, and because I still believed a son might love the woman who gave him a body. That faith has cost me more than money. The act, a spotlight he never tested properly, found the right angle to make the footage glow like confession. The sacrifice I had spent evenings mapping lighting that would be kind to her eyes, because bright glare made her flinch. I used my own savings to replace harsh bulbs with soft ones. Delayed paying a medical bill so the room would never feel like a clinic. The check late fee hurt. But I told myself her comfort was a kind of interest I would collect in a quieter currency. The deception don't fuss. He told me when I asked for one last rehearsal. You micromanage everything. Mom needs joy, not your spreadsheets. The vile contrast while I was walking the room with a small notepad, scribbling where to place a chair so she could sit without seeing the scar she hates. He was sneaking a cable through the baseboard to autoplayer his edit at a gesture, calling it surprise theater and laughing about how I'd learned to take a joke. The resolve, I do not take jokes. I take measurements, and measurements cut truer than humor. I learned to speak less whenever he performed kindness loudly. It is something daughters do when they want the house to be quiet. He counts on that. He counts on my silence, the way a thief counts on a door left unlocked out of habit. What he does not count on is that silence can be a ledger, and I write legibly. The act, he paused the video at a frame where I hold our mother's wrists. The caption read, "Look at her grip." The sacrifice I have bruised my own palms, learning the exact tension that keeps anxious hands from clawing. The exact pressure that says you are safe, without waking the old terror that someone is taking. Each bruise was a lesson I did not charge for. The deception. You're too intense. he told me once, after I showed him how to steady her during sundown hours. Just wing it. She won't remember anyway. The vile contrast while I was rubbing lotion into her fingers to keep the skin from cracking because winter makes everything brittle. He was photographing those hands to mark timestamps for his cut, then telling people, I stage care to look essential. All while using the fruits of that care, the calmer breath, the steady pulse as his proof that she didn't need me, the resolve I am happy to be unnecessary when she is comfortable. I am unwilling to be turned into proof that comfort grows on trees. I did not stop him when he started narrating my supposed motives to the guests. I let him speak. He likes the sound of authority. We all have our favorite instrument. His is volume. Mine is patience. The act he told the room I had borrowed a phrase from a doctor to look informed. The sacrifice I had stayed after appointments to ask nurses what helped most at home, wrote their answers on my arm when I ran out of paper, and kept a folded list by the sink so I would not forget when my own head was heavy. The posture of asking for help is not glamorous, but it is sturdy in storms. The deception you love being the expert, he said, shaking his head. Because he knows expertise, wears a woman's face like a scandal. The vile contrast while I was repeating the nurse's trick of humming on the exhale to make our mother breathe longer, a trick learned from a stranger who had nothing to gain. He was taking the exhale and calling it performance. Then using my borrowed phrase to accuse me of stealing. As if care could be copyrighted, but cruelty could not. The resolve, if humility is theft in his religion, I am a happy criminal. I waited. I let the projector keep talking. I let the mirror do what mirrors do. Reflect everything, including the man who thinks the frame is invisible because he built it himself. When he finally turned to me and asked, loud enough for the neighbor and the voice teacher and the past to hear, if I had anything to say, I kept my breathing even and my voice low, because tenderness travels farther when it is not trying to impress. I have full sessions, I said. I keep them for her because days blur, and sometimes songs return if a room can give them back. I have the afternoon where you practiced a joke about her forgetting you and asked me if I thought it would kill at the party. I told you no. You laughed and said maybe you would do it anyway. I did not look at the guests. I looked at him. Men who perform for rooms always forget the room is not obligated to love them. The projector's glow was cruel to his face. Mirrors are not merciful to the living. He tried to smile, the way a man lifts a shield after the spear has already entered. You're making this dramatic, he said. It was a bit. We all use humor to cope. The act he tried to rename what he had done so the word would carry less weight. The sacrifice I have named things accurately in hospital hallways, in kitchens that smell like soap and worry, in bedrooms where the clock breathes loud. Naming correctly costs dignity because it makes people uncomfortable. And I learned long ago that comfort is the tax you pay to keep the right words. The deception you turn everything into a tragedy, he added, smug as a weatherman, reporting sunshine from an umbrella factory. The vile contrast while I was learning to call fear by its name, so fear would get tired and sit down. He was renaming cruelty as comedy, then asking the crowd to applaud the rebrand, insisting that my refusal to laugh proved I had no soul. The resolve no is a complete sentence. I will use it like a key. He asked to see the full sessions. He lifted his hands like a judge, asking for evidence he had already dismissed in private. He was sure I would stammer about privacy and consent, and look like I had something to hide. He rehearsed this moment. I had rehearsed it too, but my script is shorter. I don't show her therapy without her permission, I said. But I will show you the transcript of that afternoon, because you asked me to keep notes for your podcast segment on memory. Remember, I let the word sit. Remember. It chose its own irony. I pulled a paper from my bag, the old-fashioned kind. the kind that folds and read the line where he tested the joke out loud. The line where I told him it would hurt her. The line where he said pain made people pay attention. The room did a small thing then. The thing people do when truth arrives without fireworks, it shifted its weight. The neighbor crossed her arms. The voice teacher stopped smiling. One of his friends, the one who thinks sarcasm is an Olympic sport, suddenly found the floor fascinating. He started blaming my tone, then my timing, then the misunderstanding that had occurred because I don't get humor. Men who run out of script call the stage hostile. The act he tried to retrofit innocence onto the wreck he built. The sacrifice I have been gentle with him for years, to keep our mother from flinching when voices rise. Being gentle with a man who spits on gentleness costs you parts of yourself. You only notice when you go searching for a word and find a bruise instead. The deception. You always make me the villain, he said. It's exhausting. The vile contrast while I was swallowing comebacks and smiling at holidays to keep her from noticing the temperature drop in the room. He was collecting those swallowed comebacks as proof that he was right all along, using my restraint as rope to tie me to a chair and call it a throne. The resolve the chair is empty now. I am standing. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to list the hours. I didn't need to hold up my hands to show calluses. Grief cannot see. I only needed to be exact. Exactness is unsexy but undefeated. You wanted a tribute, I said. So I built one. You wanted a performance. So you edited one. I keep the full songs. She will hear them when she wants to. You won't. I looked at our mother then. Her eyes were bright, the way winter light is bright clean. A little thin. She reached for the armrest and found it on the first try. She didn't say my name. She didn't have to. She hummed the first bar of a hymn she used to sing when we were little, and she was taller than the world. The room forgot to applaud. That felt right. He took the non-applause like a slap. He will return it. Men like him call return fire balance. I call it proof. The mirror room had done its work. The mirrors had done more than that. Every angle fed back to him the shape of what he'd made. And he didn't like the dimensions. He struck a new tone, contrite, boyish, the understudy of empathy. I just wanted to make her birthday special, he said. I went too far with the video. I thought it would be funny. Everyone knows Rachel cares. I'm sorry if it came out wrong. If. The softest weapon in the language, the act he offered a conditional apology to reset the board. The sacrifice I have accepted that kind of apology in kitchens and cars and doorways because peace felt like a blanket someone else held. Choosing genuine quiet over counterfeit calm means you must stand in the cold a while. The deception. Let's put this behind us, he added, trying to slide the projector remote into his pocket like a magician palming a coin. The vile contrast while I was planning a surprise that would let her see herself singing from a kind angle, mirrors angled to multiply the strongest notes. Not the weakest. He was hiding a device designed to multiply my worst angle. Then inviting the faithful to watch it loop, until they forgot what a whole song sounded like. The resolve: we will not put this behind us. We will file it where it belongs so it can be found again. I did not show the whole session that night. Consent does not bend for convenience. I did, however, read one last line from my notes. The one that would land without violating what she entrusted to me. You said, I read, you hoped she would forget your joke by the party so you could try it fresh. I folded the page. I put it away. He stared at me like I had changed languages mid-sentence. Maybe I had. I was done speaking in the dialect of permission. Guests left in pairs, with the soft murmur of people re-editing what they thought they saw. He stood by the mirrors and tried to smile at his reflection. But his reflection did not return the favor. I collected the hymn book we had borrowed for the night and slid it into my bag. He watched me like an officer watches a civilian with a camera offended by the possibility of record. I walked our mother to her room. She asked if there had been cake. I said yes and told her it was lemon. She smiled because lemon was a summer we used to live in. I tucked her in and placed a small framed mirror by the lamp, tilted away from the bed so the reflection would catch the window and not her face. She hates seeing herself tired. Everyone does. The mirror was for light, not judgment. On the way out, he met me in the hallway. "You made me look bad," he said, voice low now that the audience had gone. "I won't forget that." He meant it as a threat. It landed like a promise. The thing about people who cannot be wrong is that they do incredible work proving you right. I slept that night like someone goes to the edge of the pool and stays there, feet in, waiting to see if the water will be kind in the morning. It is not peace. It is rest in armor. He will not forgive being seen. He will lace his apology with a nail, then complain when I bleed on his shirt. He will do something louder next. The mirror room taught him a lesson. He refuses to learn. Reflection is not a weapon unless you are already carrying one. Before I close this chapter, I will give you one more piece of the ledger he created for me. The act, he sent me a text before midnight. No hard feelings, as if sentiment were a rubber band you snap against your wrist to remind you you're cruel but cute. The sacrifice, I drafted a gentle reply and deleted it. Drafted another and deleted it. Because every gentle reply I've ever sent him becomes proof I was wrong to mind. Gentleness is not permission, but he treats it like signature on a blank page. "The deception you love being angry," he wrote when I did not answer. "It gives you purpose." The vile contrast while I was deciding not to give him the satisfaction of a fight at 1 a.m. because our mother sleeps better when the house is quiet. He was labeling my restraint as rage and my silence as addiction, then using the label as grounds for his next intervention. The resolve purpose is what remains when you stop asking for his definitions. Tomorrow, he will start calling people. He will try for a new audience. He will change the soundtrack and test a different cut. Let him. I have the original. I have more than that. I have the habit of being exact, and exactness is the only art form that survives a smear. And if you are wondering whether I am angry, I am not. Anger is bright and burns out. I prefer the dimmer flame that takes a house down nail-by-nail patience with a memory. I will not chase him. He will come back on his own, bringing me the next thing I need. I am writing this for those who have been turned into exhibits by the person they protected. Do not worry about applause. Worry about keeping your hands steady. Witnesses come and go. The ledger remains. I will end this night with the softest noise in the world, the ceiling fan over my mother's bed, making a whisper that sounds like a tired hymn. The kind you don't need to know the words to hum along. And I will begin the morning with a small, ordinary task that carries the weight of a verdict, labeling a folder with the date of his party and tucking the transcript inside. Because paper is stubborn. And I intend to be. 2. Before I close the door on this part, here is the quiet truth. The projector could not touch, she smiled at Lemon. And it stayed. I wonder how many of you have had your care edited into accusation. How many of you have held a wrist gently and been told your fingers were a fist? How many of you have watched a man apologize to his reflection and leave the room believing he was absolved? Tell me in the comments if you've ever had to breathe evenly while someone tried to narrate your life for you. The morning after the mirror night, silence sat in the house like an inspector. It wasn't peace. It was the kind of stillness that checks if you're guilty. Scott didn't call, which was unusual. He liked to manage aftermaths the way others manage headlines. When he didn't, I knew he was building something. His silences are blueprints. The first sign came on Sunday. Mrs. Albright from church sent a message that began with, "I hope you're holding up." Nothing in the world feels less like hope than those words. I asked what she meant, and she said she'd heard I was under a lot of financial strain caring for Margaret, that people admired my bravery for trying to make ends meet. I thanked her and closed my phone. Scott never starts with direct accusation. He builds the room, then lets you furnish it with your own defensiveness. Wednesday. Another message this time from one of his old coworkers asking if I needed help navigating caregiver reimbursements. I smiled at the phrasing. That's his style, philanthropic sabotage. Frame someone as struggling, needy, almost heroic but slightly pathetic. Make pity do the work of slander. The act he spread, the idea that I was broke and dipping into our mother's savings. The sacrifice I had, in truth, used some of my own to pay for extra therapy sessions he'd refused to approve. I kept receipts, labeled by date and category, because precision is cheaper than defense later. The deception, "I'm just worried about transparency," he probably said. That's his favorite word. Sounds noble. Hides control. The vile contrast while I was calculating miles for tax deduction to save $50. He was whispering that I spent our mother's pension on designer lighting for her Instagram project. The resolve if he wants transparency. I will give him glass clear. Sharp and reflective. I didn't fight it publicly. I started watching patterns. Donations to our mother's choir fund had been logged in her handwriting. I knew the slant of her cursive, the way her F looped backward like a ribbon curling toward regret. 2 new slips appeared that week. Both were dated the day after her bad tremor episode, when she couldn't even hold a spoon. The signature looked right, but the ink shade was slightly darker. The angle half a degree higher. My eye caught it the way a singer hears a flat note. I checked the envelopes. The postmarks were identical to letters Scott had sent from his office 2 months earlier. I didn't make a scene. I just made a copy. Then another. Then 3. 1 for the folder. 1 for the off-site drive. 1 for the future. He called Thursday afternoon. Voice buttered with concern. "Mom mentioned you've been a little distracted." "Everything okay?" "Perfectly," I said. "I've been reconciling receipts." He paused, thrown off by the word reconciling. He prefers handling or arranging words with soft edges that allow retreat. "Just making sure. People talk. You know. I'd hate for misunderstandings." He always names gossip like weather. Something that happens to him. Never something he causes. I let him talk. He mentioned that donations were missing from the books. I asked which books. He said the church ones. I asked if he'd seen them. He said heard about them. A perfect circle of plausible deniability. That night I laid out the receipts on the dining table, aligning them by date. I noticed the pattern: each forged donation matched one of his recent social posts about doing more for the community. He had literally built a moral campaign on our mother's counterfeit generosity. I smiled. It was almost artistic. The act he used charity as camouflage. The sacrifice I let him keep the praise for weeks because confrontation drains oxygen faster than deceit. The deception. "You're so selfless," people told him. "Your mother must be proud." The vile contrast while he soaked in approval. I was sorting pharmacy bills, ensuring her new medication didn't interact with the old one, labeling them with colored dots, red for morning, blue for night, so she'd never confuse time again. The resolve time is honest. It always tells on forgery. 2 nights later, I went to Mom's room with tea. She asked, suddenly lucid. Did Scott ever return that choir checkbook? I said no. She frowned. He said he was updating addresses. Her memory flickered like a bulb trying to decide between truth and mercy. I told her not to worry. I left the tea untouched on the dresser. He arrived the next morning, unannounced, holding flowers. That's his war uniform gesture first. Justification, second. Mom, he said. People are saying your name's been used for some wrong donations. I think Rachel's been misplacing forms. It was cleanly done, phrased as concern for her reputation. Not mine. Even in attack, he tries to look benevolent. I stood by the kitchen door and let the sentence hang. What donations, she asked. The ones to the church. Maybe clerical errors, he said, glancing at me like a man testing the strength of a lock. I said nothing. I watched. The mirror of his face wavered between confidence and doubt. After he left, I sat down with our mother and showed her the slips. She looked at the handwriting for a long time. That's mine, she said first. Then, no, it's not. She traced the letter M. I never make the middle line that long. That's what I thought, I said. She blinked. He shouldn't do that. No, I said. But he thinks he can because he believes people forget. She looked at me, eyes glassy but direct. Then don't forget. I promised I wouldn't. The act he framed suspicion as filial duty. The sacrifice I let our mother witness it, though it cracked something in her trust. The deception I just want clarity, he told the pastor that evening. Voice. Sweet like vinegar under sugar. The vile contrast while he called the pastor to check details. I was at home cross-referencing handwriting under a lamp she once used for sewing. The glass magnifier glowed faintly, turning each forged curve into a confession. The resolve I made high-resolution scans and stored them with timestamps. When his gossip reached my design clients, one canceled a consultation to avoid any confusion about publicity. I felt nothing but confirmation. He had escalated exactly as expected from rumor to public ripple. People like him don't innovate. They repeat. The next step would be guilt theater. He'd call to make peace. Propose that we handle everything privately. That way, he could erase the trail while appearing magnanimous. I rehearsed my line. I would say yes to the meeting, but not to the erasure. It came on schedule. Friday evening. Can we meet at Mom's Sunday? He asked. Just to clear the air. Of course, I said. My tone neutral. Precise. That's what unnerves him calm. That sounds like paperwork being filed. Sunday morning. He arrived early. The air in the living room smelled of lilies. He always brings flowers to mask motive. I had arranged the dining table again, but this time there was only one thing on it, a single envelope addressed to the church accountant. Inside, copies of every forged receipt and a short note from our mother, confirming she did not write them. I had helped her draft it 2 nights earlier during her clearest hour. He saw the envelope before he saw me. What's this? Closure, I said. He frowned. You shouldn't involve outsiders in family misunderstandings. Forgery isn't a misunderstanding. He laughed softly. You sound rehearsed. I am. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're making this worse than it needs to be. Maybe, I said, but I'm making it accurate. He called me dramatic. I let the words slide off. Drama and please exaggeration. Precision doesn't raise its voice. When he reached for the envelope, I didn't stop him. Let him read it. He opened it halfway, scanned the top line, froze at the signature Margaret Turner. Not the shaky loops of her illness, but the neat, clean version she wrote when alert. Proof of lucidity kills plausible deniability faster than anger ever could. The act he tried to retrieve evidence midair. The sacrifice I had used one of her best mornings to sign it. Knowing lucidity costs her hours of fatigue. The deception. She doesn't understand what she's signing, he said quickly. The vile contrast while he accused her of confusion. The note itself included the phrase, "I am writing this on a good day because I know my good days are numbered." The resolved truth in handwriting, time-stamped and witnessed, doesn't need defense. He left without the flowers. The stems wilted within an hour. I threw them out. That evening, I sat on the porch, watching dusk wash the windows. The mirror room's reflections were faint now, only catching the last fragments of light. It occurred to me that every act of his requires witnesses, every act of mine requires record. That's the difference between spectacle and evidence. One dies without applause, the other survives silence. The next morning, the pastor called. "Scott told me everything's been resolved," he said. "He said you two cleared up the confusion." "Almost," I said. "One last document pending." He hesitated. "I'm glad you're handling it calmly." Calm is a form of weaponry when precision has replaced rage. Later that day, the church newsletter printed a correction. The Turner family thanks everyone for their generosity and confirms all accounting has been verified. No mention of who caused the issue. But that's fine. My name no longer sat beside pity. It sat beside absence, the cleanest vindication of all. I opened my folder and slipped the article inside. Beneath it, I placed one of the lilies, dried, pressed flat. I labeled it, "The Apology That Never Spoke." The air around the house finally started to breathe again, but quiet has a half-life. In men like him, remorse decays into retaliation. The whisper campaign will not end here. It will just change frequency. The last thing I did before sleep was check my email filters. His name was already in the blocked list. Blocking is not revenge. It's punctuation. Somewhere between midnight and the first bird call, my phone buzzed once, a notification from a social account tagged with my mother's name. A post titled, "When Family Members Take Advantage of the Sick." The profile was new. The writing style wasn't. The mirror had found its next surface. And so the cycle begins again. The photo surfaced on a Wednesday, at the hour when truth is too tired to defend itself. It showed me standing beside my mother in the clinic hallway, her arm looped through mine. The light overhead, too white to forgive anyone. The caption said, "When family makes illness their brand." No signature. No context. Just a sentence designed to bruise without leaving fingerprints. The first person to send it to me was an old client, with the hesitant text, "Saw this and thought it couldn't be true. But you might want to know." The second came from a stranger, a message request filled with pity that pretended to be curiosity. By the end of the day, the image had folded itself through 3 community groups and one small-town gossip page that thrives on morality dressed as concern. Scott didn't post it directly. He never does. His art is plausible distance. The page admin was a woman who'd once worked with him at the local radio station. I checked metadata, the way you check a wound not to reopen it, but to confirm it's real. The upload origin traced back to a laptop registered under his business domain. People think digital footprints are invisible because they don't look closely enough. The act he published, Shame is Journalism. The sacrifice I had to watch our mother's face appear online, her expression soft, trusting, unaware she'd been cropped into a weapon. The deception people deserve a transparency, he'd say if asked. I'm not hiding anything. The vile contrast while I was covering her medical copays with freelance design jobs and taking phone consultations in my car so she could sleep undisturbed. He was branding her vulnerability as content. The resolve silence first, then evidence. Noise belongs to him. Proof belongs to me. I didn't tell her. She still thought Facebook was a window for seeing old choir friends. She liked clicking on the hearts. I wanted her heart to stay unpunctured for at least another week. Instead, I closed her laptop at night and told her the internet was running slow. Lies told for mercy have a short expiration date, but they can buy you quiet hours. By Friday, the gossip had metastasized into commentary. A woman from church wrote a long post about boundaries between caregiving and control. Another added, "Some people just can't let go of the attention." The words wrapped themselves around my name without spelling it. The way ivy wraps brick, it doesn't need to be invited to cling. The act they parroted his narrative. The sacrifice I lost clients who believed discretion meant disappearance. The deception. It's sad when family issues become public. One of his friends wrote under a pseudonym, pretending neutrality. The vile contrast while I was erasing my contact info from old listings to keep our privacy intact. He was reintroducing me to the world as a scandal. The resolve, there's no winning a shouting match against echoes. The trick is to record the acoustics. I archived every post, each timestamped, each saved in triplicate. That's how you turn defamation into documentation. By the time the weekend arrived, the story had settled into its intended posture, a whisper that feels like truth because it isn't loud enough to question. I stopped answering calls. The house began to sound like itself again. Even so, quietness started to weigh. My mother noticed before I spoke. "You've been walking softer," she said, one afternoon while I was folding towels. "Is the floor fragile?" "No," I said. "Just practicing care." She nodded, like it was a new exercise in her therapy regimen. I wanted to tell her the world outside was no longer a patient but a courtroom. Instead, I turned on the radio to cover my thoughts. The announcer's voice, his voice filled the room, talking about the culture of exploitation in modern caregiving. He never named me, but he didn't have to. Listeners love riddles when the answer is someone they already distrust. I sat there, letting his tone wash over the afternoon. He was good-measured, empathetic, the kind of voice that could narrate a crime while sounding like a rescuer. He spoke about families torn between love and dependency, about the thin line between help and control. I knew that line. I'd walked it in bare feet. Hearing him own it as performance was almost impressive. The act he converted malice into media. The sacrifice I gave up the right to rage out loud. Outrage would confirm his framing. The deception he positioned himself as advocate for caregivers. A hero who warns others about self-serving relatives. The vile contrast while he recorded that segment. I was helping our mother remember how to button her cardigan, guiding her fingers until she smiled. The resolve, if he uses voice to wound, I'll use evidence to vaccinate. That night I opened his program's website. The newest entry, a transcript of the broadcast with images, 3 photographs, one of which was the cropped clinic photo. My mother's face blurred this time. Minenot. I downloaded the file, then checked metadata again. The same device. The same office. the same time zone offset that matches his schedule. I wrote a short note. Unauthorized use of private medical imagery. Confirmed source, file name details. Screenshots attached. I didn't send it yet. There's an art to timing truth. Release it too early and it looks like emotion. Release it too late and it looks like revenge. The middle is where precision lives. He texted me the next morning. Don't let online stuff get to you. He wrote. People misunderstand intentions. No apology. No ownership. I didn't answer. 2 hours later, another message. Mom shouldn't see comments like that. Maybe take a break from social for her sake. It's elegant weaponized concern to erase the witness. The act he used protection as pretext for isolation. The sacrifice I had to pretend compliance to keep observation lines open. The deception I just want peace, he told mutual acquaintances. The vile contrast, while he was advising me to step away from the internet, he was refreshing his own posts. Counting sympathy reacts like prayer beads. The resolve piece is not absence. Peace is control of the narrative. I stopped checking my own accounts publicly. Instead, I opened a new profile under an alias, one of his old radio character names. Through that, I watched his digital choreography, every post carefully constructed to seem secondhand. Every insinuation a mirror angled just enough to reflect me without mentioning me. People called him brave for speaking up. His bravery consisted of not using pronouns. When the local paper ran a feature titled, "The Emotional Economy of Care," quoting him extensively, I clipped it out and placed it in my folder. Each paragraph carried the smell of self-righteousness. He told the reporter, "My sister's been amazing with our mom. It's just hard when love turns into control. Boundaries matter." That's his genius. Praise wrapped around poison. Readers digest it before realizing it cuts. The pastor called again. Scott's interview was powerful. He said, "He mentioned you by relation, not name. Still, it's good to hear family working through things." "Good," I said. I added nothing else. When people think you're fragile, brevity sounds like strength. At night, I couldn't sleep. Not from fear is loud and honest, but from the slow hum of accuracy. Every post, every half-truth, every sympathetic message formed a pattern too deliberate to be chaos. He wasn't improvising, he was documenting me backward, erasing context line by line until the remaining outline looked like guilt. It was a mirror again. Just digital this time, his reflection painted over mine. So I did what I always do. I made a record. I printed the photo, the posts, the article, his transcript, his texts. I wrote annotations in the margin: motive, timing, source, target. The folder thickened, not from drama, but from data. Justice is weight. A week later, one of his friends, a woman from his station, sent me a private message. "For what it's worth," she wrote, "he asked us to share that post. He said it was to raise awareness." Attached was the original email. "Please circulate, people should see what manipulation looks like." I thanked her and saved the file. Metadata confirmed again, same timestamp as his first upload. The act, the proof, surfaced voluntarily. The sacrifice I had to listen politely to her confession, pretending it was a kindness. "The deception, he means well," she said. "He just gets passionate." The vile contrast while she rationalized his cruelty. I catalogued her message into the evidence chain. The resolve people who excuse harm become exhibits too. I sent a single email to the station's HR department. Subject line: unauthorized use of private medical content. No threats. No emotion. Just attachments. Metadata. And a short sentence. Please confirm receipt for compliance review. Bureaucracy responds best to bureaucracy. Within 48 hours, the page was taken down. The audio removed. No apology. No explanation. The internet just blinked. Cleaned. Moved on. That's how victories sound when you don't need applause. He called that evening, voice dripping with the casual tone of someone pretending coincidence. Hey, weird about the site crash. Did you report something? I log everything, I said. Silence. Then a laugh too brief to be real. You always were thorough. Yes, I said. Still am. He changed the subject. Asked if Mom's therapy was going well, if she'd been lucid lately. I gave monosyllables. He thrives on dialogue. Starvation is the cure. When he hung up, I could almost hear the frustration scratch through his politeness. That night, the house finally breathed differently. Even the mirror room seemed lighter, as if reflections had exhaled. I made tea, opened the folder, and reviewed each page in order. It wasn't vengeance, it was accounting. Each entry closed a loop, and loops make patterns, and patterns tell courts what motive looks like. Not that I'll ever take him there. Courts need loudness. I prefer quiet systems, but I kept thinking about his last question, her lucidity. Maybe he was preparing a new angle claim incompetence, reposition himself as protector. When cruelty fails publicly, it usually rebrands as care. The next morning, our mother asked why she wasn't allowed to go online anymore. I asked who told her that. Scott said it might overwhelm me. She answered. There it was. The next phase. Control through protection. The act he began isolating her narrative under the guise of safeguarding. The sacrifice I had to counter without alarming her. Without becoming the villain, he painted. The deception he worries too much, I said, smiling. The vile contrast while she felt grateful for his thoughtfulness. He was resetting passwords remotely, her accounts, and her mail, even her pharmacy portal. The resolve I printed backup access forms that night and locked them in my safe. By week's end, he'd convinced half the extended family that I was unstable, exhausted, maybe even manipulative. They called with soft voices, full of phrases like, "We just want everyone happy." When language starts smoothing itself like that, guilt is in the room. I didn't argue. I sent a group message with one line. All documents regarding Mom's care are available upon request. Attached was a link to a read-only folder containing invoices, prescriptions, appointment notes. Transparency, the weapon he loves most, handed back to him sterilized. No one replied. Silence means shock in families trained to perform harmony. 2 days later, my mother's primary nurse called me privately. Your brother's been asking about transferring her medical power of attorney, she said quietly. Said you were under stress. There it was, the next escalation. From whisper to paperwork. I thanked her. Said I'd handle it. After hanging up, I wrote in my logbook, Cycle 3 begins. He moves from narrative to documentation. Then I closed the book gently. My hands were steady. The house was very quiet. Even the radio had gone off air. The silence wasn't peace anymore. It was positioning. I turned off every light except the one above the table. The folder lay open like a patient mid-surgery. Organs of evidence lined neatly in rows. Each printout a heartbeat of the story he tried to rewrite. I thought about the line from his broadcast, the thin line between help and control, and smiled. He was right about the line. He just picked the wrong side of it. Tomorrow I'll file the new documents. Tomorrow I'll make another copy. Storms don't frighten me anymore. They're predictable, patterned, and they leave sediment proof for those patient enough to sift. For now, I'll let the house hold its breath. He will call again. He always does when attention fades. His need for narrative is stronger than my need for revenge. And that's my advantage. Let him whisper. The walls remember. The mirror remembers. And I, the archivist of his undoing, I'm still listening. The notice arrived folded twice. The kind of paper that pretends to be polite. Inside, a line that said, "Appointment scheduled for review of power of attorney documentation," followed by a date and a signature that wasn't mine. Scott's tone on the phone was bright when I called. "It's just formality," he said. "Mom needs updated witnesses. Standard protocol." He has a gift for making manipulation sound like maintenance. I asked why the form had my name listed as alternate, not primary. He said something about efficiency, the notary requiring consistency, and hung up before I could request the regulation number. His silences always land exactly where the law starts to yawn. I didn't tell our mother yet. She'd been lucid that morning, singing under her breath while peeling an orange. I wanted her to stay there, in the citrus light, not in the fog of paperwork. I spent the afternoon calling the notary office. The clerk's voice was professional, but strained too careful, like someone who already knows there's a problem. "Your brother booked the appointment on behalf of your mother," she said. "He mentioned your consent was implicit since you handle daily care." Implicit consent, the phrase should be printed on his business card. I asked for the document number, then the request source. Both came from his company email. I thanked her and hung up. Facts are oxygen, panic wastes it. That evening, I printed the statute on medical representation updates, section numbers, clause references, everything. He hoped I wouldn't check. It said clearly the existing agent must be notified in writing and must confirm awareness before revision. No such notice existed. I slipped the law printout into my binder, labeled it Anchor, the act he tried to alter legal guardianship through administrative stealth. The sacrifice I spent that night reviewing precedents instead of sleeping, my eyes tracing the same paragraph until words turned into pulse. "The deception standard protocol," he'd said, betting on my fatigue. The vile contrast while he was orchestrating signatures through convenience. I was spoon-feeding our mother soup she'd forgotten halfway through cooling. The resolve if he wants procedure. I will meet him there, clause by clause. The next day, the house felt smaller, as though the walls knew papers were plotting against us. I ironed my shirt before leaving. People listen better to pressed fabric. At the notary office, the receptionist looked nervous, glancing between her screen and me. "Mr. Turner's already here," she said. I smiled. "Then we'll save time." He stood near the counter, holding a bouquet performer's prop. "Rachel," he said warmly, "you made it." I said, "I always do." The notary, a woman in her 50s, invited us to sit. She had the air of someone trained to mediate family storms while pretending to see only the paperwork. "We're just here to witness authorization updates," she began. "Mrs. Turner will confirm her choice in presence of both parties." Wonderful, Scott said. She wanted this. Does she understand what this is? I asked. He smiled. She's fine. You underestimate her clarity. It was almost kind, the way he weaponized faith. They brought her in, escorted by a nurse from the facility. She looked small but dignified, hair brushed, cardigan buttoned wrong by one hole. Hello, dear, she said to me first. I kissed her cheek. Big day, I said softly. She laughed. Every day's big when I remember breakfast. The notary smiled, trying to lighten the air. Mrs. Turner, we're reviewing your power of attorney paperwork. Do you recall signing this originally? She squinted. My daughter handled that. I told her to. She knows my wishes. Scott cleared his throat. We're just updating witnesses. Mom. Nothing's changing. The notary hesitated. Actually, the new form lists Mr. Scott Turner as primary. His expression flickered a microsecond of irritation before charm resumed. Clerical phrasing, he said quickly. Means nothing substantive. I slid the statute printout across the table. Section 12, B. Subsection 3. Updates cannot proceed under implied consent or clerical ambiguity. The room went still. The notary read the paragraph, nodded once, then looked at him. Mr. Turner, did you provide written notice to your sister? He smiled too wide. I assumed. Assumption isn't compliance, she said quietly. I could feel the air tighten. Not with victory, but verification. Bureaucracy loves formality. It sides with whoever respects its syntax. He tried again. Mom said she wanted me to handle things. Right. Mom. She looked confused. Handle what? The bills. The decisions. I thought Rachel does that, she said. Her voice was gentle. Puzzled. Pure. He exhaled through his teeth. Mom, we talked about this. No. Dear, she said. You talked. I listened. There's a difference. Even the notary looked down to hide a smile. The act he attempted emotional pressure in public office. The sacrifice I let her confusion unfold. Though it pierced me, clarity hurts before it heals. The deception. You're stressing her, he said to me, tone switching to moral authority. The vile contrast while I was ensuring every signature line had explanation boxes ready. He was staging care as performance. The resolve I didn't respond. I let paperwork speak. The notary turned to my mother. Mrs. Turner, would you like to proceed with this new authorization? She studied the form. It looks tidy, she said. Who wrote my name here? I did. Mom, he said softly. She frowned. That's not how I make my M. Mine loops lower. I could have hugged her. Precision runs in blood. The notary's pen froze mid-air. Perhaps we should postpone, she said carefully. He raised his voice just enough to break professionalism. Why are we complicating this? She's just tired. She wants this done. She just questioned the handwriting. I said. He turned toward me, face tight. You're twisting things. No, I said. I'm aligning them. He leaned forward, You think you're always the smartest in the room? I only need to be accurate. The silence that followed was the sound of walls taking sides. The notary cleared her throat. Given the uncertainty expressed, I cannot proceed without legal counsel present. Scott's hand tightened around the pen. Unbelievable, he muttered. Then louder. This is harassment. No, she said evenly. This is procedure. He dropped the pen. It rolled across the desk, hit the floor. Tiny metallic echo of defeat. The nurse gently guided our mother's hand away from the paper. Let's get you some water, she whispered. My mother nodded. This room's too bright, she said. I followed them out. Behind us, the notary told him to reschedule through counsel. He said he would file a complaint. That's his favorite last line when cornered threatened bureaucracy with itself. Outside, sunlight made everything honest again. My mother squinted. Did we finish the thing? Almost, I said. She smiled faintly. Good. Always finish things slow. I drove her home, window down, her humming soft under the wind. Back inside, she dozed while I made tea. The air smelled of paper, ink, closure half-baked, but real. I opened my folder and added the appointment summary the notary had printed for me. Date, time, clause reference, evidence, even of interruptions, counts, at 8 p.m. He texted. You made a scene today. I replied. I followed the form. He didn't respond. 10 minutes later, another message. You're enjoying this. Aren't you? I typed back. Compliance isn't enjoyment. Sent. Blocked. The act he tried post-defeat intimidation. The sacrifice I surrendered the illusion that this would ever stay civil. The deception family shouldn't need laws, he'd said months ago. The vile contrast while he exploited that belief. I learned to weaponize precision until law became the quietest language of self-defense. The resolve next time. I'll bring witnesses who don't flinch. At midnight, I filed an incident note with the county clerk routine administrative log. No emotion. Attached the scanned notice. The transcript. The notary's temporary suspension form. Bureaucracy is slow, but slowness is impartial. It crushes everyone at the same speed. When I turned off the light, I saw my reflection in the window calm, tired, exact. Behind me, our mother murmured a line from an old hymn, something about truth being its own armor. I believed her. He will escalate. They always do when paperwork fails. Maybe next it'll be inheritance. Maybe property. His imagination is limited by greed, and greed is measurable. I already have the template ready. For now, I let the printer sleep. The night hums like an archive being updated, and somewhere in another house, he is rehearsing outrage for a mirror that no longer flatters him. The first letter after the notary visit came in a cream envelope, embossed initials pretending to be family dignity. The return address read Turner and Blake Law Offices. I opened it with the calm of someone dissecting a familiar species of parasite. Inside, a notice of intent to review estate holdings and will revision for Mrs. Margaret Turner. Signed by an attorney I recognized from Scott's networking events, someone who had once called him visionary between cocktails. The letter asked for my attendance at a preliminary assessment of property distribution. No context. No invitation to our mother. Just a date. Scott texted an hour later. It's just paperwork, he wrote. Transparency for everyone's comfort. Transparency again. That talisman. He polishes whenever deceit needs a halo. I replied, comfort is measurable. So is fraud. He didn't answer. The storm, I realized, wouldn't come with thunder. It would come with signatures. The act he attempted control by inheritance. The sacrifice I had to re-enter the legal theater he rehearsed in for years. The deception, just formalities. His favorite spell. The vile contrast while he planned optics of legacy. I was still counting our mother's medication pills. One by one. Aligning the blister packs like soldiers. The resolve if he wants legacy. I'll give him a record he can't erase. The meeting was set in an office, too clean to trust walls gray. Carpet soundless. Glass desk pretending to be neutral. Scott arrived 10 minutes early. Always punctual when power is on the line. He wore contrition like a well-fitted suit. I know last time got tense. He began. Let's be adults. I nodded. Adults read fine print. The attorney cleared his throat. This is a standard verification of Mrs. Turner's estate outline. Mr. Turner requested to ensure all beneficiaries understand the distribution. He looked at me as he said, understand, as if comprehension were consent. Has she requested this review herself? I asked. A pause. At her son's suggestion, I opened my folder, slid across the notary's incident summary from last month. You might want to review paragraph 3, improper initiation of document change without agent notice. We're still within administrative audit window. Scott's jaw tightened. You're making this adversarial. Documentation isn't adversarial. It's oxygen. The attorney tried to steer neutrality. Mrs. Turner's will currently divides assets equally. Mr. Turner proposes establishing a management trust for efficiency. I knew what that meant. He'd control liquidity. I'd inherit supervision. Power disguised as stewardship. Define efficiency. I said. He smiled. Protection from mismanagement. Whose mismanagement? Not accusing, he said quickly. Just protecting Mom's legacy. Legacy, another word stripped for parts. I let the silence sit long enough to grow teeth. Then I placed a small stack of papers on the table, the printouts of his forged donation receipts, the HR removal confirmation from his broadcast smear, the notary's refusal letter, and finally a signed statement from our mother dated the previous week, her handwriting slow but unmistakably hers. My daughter Rachel will remain primary agent and custodian of my records. This reflects my intent and peace of mind. Scott went pale. Where did you get that? From her, I said. On a good morning. She's not of sound mind. Then your trust proposal collapses by default, because its foundation depends on her consent. You can't argue both. The attorney shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps we should reconvene. Scott's voice cracked. You forged that. I smiled. Handwriting analysis available upon request. You like experts, shall I hire yours? He pushed back his chair. This is insane. No, I said softly. This is audit. He stormed out. The door closed like punctuation. The act he weaponized legacy. The sacrifice I turned evidence into inheritance armor instead of rest. The deception family should trust. Family. The vile contrast while he sold trust like currency. I was paying its real cost in time. Vigilance. Sleep. The resolve every hour documented is an hour he cannot rewrite. That evening he tried a new tactic: morality. A long message appeared in my inbox titled, "Family Before Forms." It began with, "I don't know when you became so cold, but Mom deserves warmth, not bureaucracy." He attached old photos, birthday tables, vacation smiles, proof that once we shared oxygen. At the bottom, "I just want what's fair." Fair. His prettiest word. I printed the email, annotated in the margin, "Emotional leverage attempt #7. File under optics." 3 days later, a courier delivered another envelope. This one from the same attorney, but marked personal communication. Inside was a draft amendment naming him co-executor. The ink was fresh, the signatures placeholders. I recognized the strategy: create momentum, then shame me for stopping it. I didn't call. I wrote instead, "To the probate clerk, request for preemptive verification of estate control, suspected undue influence activity. Prior documentation attached." Neutral. Factual. Lethal in its accuracy. Bureaucratie crawl. But when it bites, it doesn't let go. Within a week, a clerk from the registrar's office called to confirm that all existing estate documents were under review for irregular initiation. Translation: his application froze mid-process. He wouldn't know yet. I let time work. Time is bureaucracy's silent deputy. In those days, our mother's health wavered. She had lucid mornings that glowed like forgiveness, then evenings where she spoke to shadows as if they were memories paying rent. One morning she asked, "Why is Scott angry?" "Because paperwork loves me more," I said gently. She laughed, the small, tired laugh of someone who has seen too many men confuse inheritance with identity. He visited less. When he did, his gestures became grander flowers, chocolates, expensive scarves she'd never wear. Guilt performs well under bright colors. He avoided my eyes, but the air around him carried accusation like static. One afternoon he came while I was pruning the rose bushes. "Mum's been distant," he said. "You filling her head with things. Only clarity," I said. "She thinks I'm stealing. She thinks accurately." He exhaled, hands shaking slightly. "You're cruel." "No," I said. "You're unused to being documented." He looked at me for a long moment, then smiled. Not kind, not sane, just calculating. "When she's gone, you'll have no one to perform for." "I don't perform," I said. "I preserve." He left. The roses looked sharper against the evening light. 2 weeks later, the clerk's final letter arrived. All attempted amendments, null. Estate remains intact under current authorization. The language was plain, but its rhythm felt like judgment rendered. I filed it under closure provisional. Then, the storm's last movement began, not in law, but in public. He uploaded a video to his followers, speaking of families destroyed by control, implying he'd lost access to his mother because of greed. The comments bloomed with sympathy. He didn't name me, but he didn't need to. Anonymity is just another weapon of intimacy. I didn't reply. I archived. Every lie fossilizes if you leave it still long enough. The act he built: narrative resurrection. The sacrifice: I let defamation breathe without interference. The deception: I forgive my sister, he said on camera, haloed by self-pity. The vile contrast: while he offered forgiveness for crimes I didn't commit, Our mother was in bed, her pulse steady because I had memorized her medication cycle. The resolved truth doesn't need forgiveness. It needs endurance. 2 months passed. Winter came soft, deceptive. On the morning our mother didn't wake, the room was perfectly neat, the cup of water untouched, her hymn book open to a page about light after storms. I sat beside her, feeling the universe balance its ledger. I called Scott first. Even closure deserves witnesses. He arrived within the hour, eyes red but dry. She went peacefully. Yes. He nodded, silent. We arranged the service together because decency isn't concession. He cried publicly. I didn't. People thanked him for being strong. I let them. Strength measured by volume is his inheritance. After the funeral, the attorney handed me the final documents. The estate settled exactly as written. No amendments. No trusts. No co-executors. Everything transferred to the foundation our mother had quietly named years ago, the Margaret Turner Community Music Trust. She had bypassed both of us. He looked at me, bewildered. Did you know? I shook my head. She didn't trust either of us with her music. His laugh cracked. So you win nothing. On the contrary, I said. I win the absence of you. The act he reached the end of the script. The sacrifice I surrendered ownership to keep meaning intact. The deception you'll regret this, he said, as if loss were contagious. The vile contrast while he screamed outside the church. I was inside, cataloging hymn sheets for donation. The resolve legacy is not possession. It's proof that intention outlived manipulation. Weeks later, the trust's board contacted me, asked if I would volunteer as archivist. Since I knew her catalog system, I accepted. That's how quiet revenge works. You rebuild what they tried to weaponize. But in your own order. He disappeared from local life after that. Rumor said he moved states. Started another podcast about healing family wounds. Irony has excellent taste in hosts. I subscribed. Once. Under a fake name. He sounded calmer. Almost penitent. In one episode he said, sometimes people destroy relationships because they can't admit love feels like debt. He paused. Let the silence perform gravitas. I closed the app. Redemption through monologue is cheap. In the months that followed, I packed our mother's belongings into labeled boxes. Each item received a note cup, daily use. Photo, July afternoon. Scarf, never worn. I stored everything in the trust's archive room. Precision again. I left the mirror from the old room for last. When I lifted it, dust outlined the ghost of its frame. I looked into it once, saw my face. Older, expressionless, intact. The mirror had survived both of us. I didn't cry. The storm had taken too long for tears. Instead, I cleaned the glass until it showed nothing but light. The final act came quietly, a registered letter from the state probate office, confirming closure of all estate disputes. I placed it atop the binder, then added one more label, end. He will tell his story differently somewhere else. Let him. I have mine time-stamped, notarized, complete. The house is calm now. The air smells of ink and lemon polish. Outside, the world continues in unremarkable rhythm mail. Bills, errands, sunlight glinting off the mailbox like approval. People think revenge is noise. It isn't. It's the sound of paperwork settling exactly where it belongs. I make tea at 6 each evening. Sometimes, out of habit, I pour a second cup. I set it near the window, beside the mirror. Reflection still exists. It just knows who owns the light. The storm is over. The evidence remains, and in the silence afterward, even the glass seems grateful. There is a silence that arrives after long noise, not the absence of sound, but the recognition that nothing more needs to be said. It fills the house now, slow and symmetrical, like air rediscovering its shape. I wake before sunrise most days. The light has become gentler, filtering through the curtains the way it used to fall in the old mirror room, before everything fractured and rearranged. Some mornings, when the air is still enough, I almost believe the house is breathing with me. I haven't seen Scott in 6 months. His last message was a single line. I hope you're happy. I didn't answer. Happiness isn't a verdict. It's maintenance. I maintain things. The trust letters still arrive, monthly balance sheets, donation reports, program updates. They bear my mother's name in the header, followed by the word foundation. I never correct them when they call me director in error. Titles are just adjectives. I've learned to live with nouns: room, file, reflection, light. When the trustees invited me to attend the first children's recital, I almost said no. I thought of the noise, the faces, the possibility of seeing a resemblance in some child's expression that would undo my careful equilibrium. But curiosity is a gentler danger than fear. So I went. The hall was modest, the kind my mother would have loved: wooden stage, mismatched chairs, the faint smell of polish and dust. A girl about 10 years old sang Amazing Grace, slightly off-key but sincere enough to bend the air into forgiveness. When she finished, she smiled toward the audience, toward me, and I understood something simple. My mother's legacy had never been inheritance. It was continuity. Afterward, the director introduced me quietly. She's the one who kept the records, he said. I shook hands, smiled politely, accepted gratitude, like data input accurate but abstract. A volunteer handed me a framed photo for the archive wall, my mother in her choir robe, standing before a mirror, reflection split by candlelight. It must have been taken decades ago. I traced the outline of her hand in the glass, the same angle I once captured in those therapy recordings, the ones Scott edited into accusation. The world has a way of rebalancing its exposure if you let time do the printing. Back home, I placed the frame in the restored mirror room. The new glass panel gleamed: no hidden cameras, no secrets, just surface. The room looked smaller now, not from walls, but from absence. I opened my binder, every document filed, every envelope flattened. It's strange. Justice leaves paper heavier than guilt ever did. I keep the binder not as weapon, but as map. A record of how truth accumulates like sediment until it becomes structure. Some nights, I dream of my mother sitting by the piano, humming softly. In the dream, Scott isn't there. There are no letters, no lawyers, no arguments about legacy. Just her, the mirror, and the sound of her voice meeting its own echo. I wake with tears I don't recognize as sadness. They feel like calibration grief adjusting itself to fit the room. People ask if I've forgiven him. The question always feels premature, like asking whether a wound has become memory yet. Forgiveness isn't amnesty, it's classification. I've archived the harm. It sits on the shelf labeled resolved, right next to unsent letters and proof of intention. Sometimes I take them down, reread the documents. Not for bitterness, but to study methodology. Every lie he built used family language as scaffolding. Every defense I constructed used evidence as air. We built our versions of love out of incompatible materials. The trust accountant once said, "Your precision saved this foundation." I thanked him but didn't correct him. Precision didn't save it. Fatigue did. At some point, you get too tired to distort truth any further. Fatigue is underrated as virtue. It forces simplicity. My mother understood that in her final months. She said once, "I don't want to be remembered for the noise I made, but for the quiet I left behind." I think she succeeded. I visit her grave twice a month. The headstone is plain. Her name, her birth and death years, and the line she chose herself. The song continues in other rooms. I bring flowers, always white chrysanthemums, because they age gracefully. Sometimes, I read to her snippets of letters from the trust, a line from an article about the music therapy program. I imagine her nodding. I never mention Scott. That silence is the final inheritance I guard. He still broadcasts. I'm told. A friend sent me a link, episode 128, Lessons in Letting Go. I didn't listen. I don't need to. Every story he tells is just a rehearsal of the one he failed to control. The world is generous to people who speak beautifully about their own cruelty. But the world is also forgetful, and time edits even the most polished narratives down to noise. His voice will fade. Mine already has. By choice. That's balance. The mirror room remains open to visitors on weekends. School groups come to see the exhibit about truth and reflection. A small plaque describes how the foundation began after a daughter's dedication to her mother's dignity. They never use names. I prefer it that way. One afternoon, a teacher asked if I could explain the meaning of the restored mirror. I said, "It's not about vanity. It's about verification. Mirrors don't create, they confirm." She smiled politely, not fully understanding, and that was fine. Some truths are only meant to resonate, not translate. When the house feels too clean, I play one of my mother's recordings, the old cassette she made in 1983. Her voice carries a fragile steadiness, like someone who understood that love requires tempo control. Between verses, she laughs at a missed note. That laugh lives longer than any of us. It's in the acoustics now, threaded through the air of every restored room. I sometimes think about destruction, not his, but mine. The small destructions we commit in the name of protection, deleting emails, erasing voices, refusing to explain ourselves because explanation invites distortion. I destroyed parts of myself to preserve the rest. It's not noble, just efficient. The mirror shows that too. My reflection has lines now, not from age, but from accuracy. Precision leaves marks. If he ever returns, I won't stop him from visiting the grave. The ground is neutral, soil doesn't take sides. But I know him, he'll stand there rehearsing apologies to the air, crafting sentences that sound like accountability but function as justification. I won't hear them. And maybe that's the final kindness between us. We no longer share acoustics. In quiet moments, I find myself measuring the house differently. Rooms are no longer labeled by conflict, no office of evidence, no scene of betrayal. They've reverted to their original grammar: kitchen, hall, window, share. Even the light knows where to land again. The mirror catches it each morning. Soft rectangles gliding across the floor like folded letters arriving without sender or threat. I live in the postscript now. One evening in early spring, a storm passed without touching this street. The thunder rolled somewhere distant, an echo of a life I no longer belonged to. I stood by the window, listening to the rain that never arrived, and realized the most terrifying thing about peace is its neutrality. It asks nothing, accuses no one, just persists. I made tea. On the table sat the mirror frame, the binder, and a single unopened envelope, something from the foundation about an award in her name. I didn't open it yet. Recognition feels redundant, once silence has already justified you. When people ask what I've learned, I tell them this truth is not an argument, it's an accumulation. Justice is not loud, it's legible. And survival is not triumph, it's formatting. I formatted my life around evidence until the evidence became architecture. Now, I simply live inside the structure I built to contain his noise. It's quiet here. It's stable. It's mine. Sometimes, in the reflection of the mirror, I imagine her standing behind me, the faintest shape of patience. The echo of her voice saying, "Slow down. Record everything. Finish things slow." I smile because I finally understand the last lesson she never articulated, that dignity isn't inherited or defended. It's curated. The storm had a name once, his. Mina. Ours, but storms dissolve into weather, and weather becomes memory. What remains is the air itself, transparent and exact. I breathe it. I keep breathing. Tomorrow, I'll visit the foundation again. The children will rehearse their songs. One of them will glance toward the mirror wall and fix their hair. Light will flicker across their faces, truth bending gently through glass. I'll stand in the back, unseen, the quiet curator of aftermath, the witness to everything that almost broke but didn't. And when they finish, when applause fades into calm, I'll close my notebook, turn off the lights, and leave the room the way I found it, intact, reflective, and silent.